Hello, Scott Eustace, Healthy Golf, Community Science Director, looking at Louisiana oil and gas wells. What's in the 8866 record? Unlike other approaches, I'm coming at it from the GIS perspective because it's an essential part of Healthy Golf to do field visits, ground truths, whereas most organizations are coming from the production side. There's a lot of interest in the production side, of course, because that's where patterns of profit making and investments are being made, which are very important to discuss about the behavior of firms. But from an environmental side, I don't care about the well. I care about the water and everything around the well. So, really at Healthy Golf, we're coming up with the 8866 approach. There's a lot of information that's in the 8866 layer, that's in the general well layer. They tend to flood it with a lot of notes, and yet still the data standards are rough. And just look, Louisiana lacks employees for the well population that we have. So one of these things is oil field. Louisiana has a point database for oil field. There is a numerical designation for field, and every oil well in 8866 has a field, even if that field is a wildcat field, and they're just regional wildcats. So some wells say Wildcat South Lake Charles District, which is historical because we no longer have Lake Charles or Houma districts. But you'll see it in the field name, which also has a numerical designation in the data. But because we only have point data for oil fields and not polygons, I moved to using leases for state waters areas as a way. The lease agreement roughly mirrors the oil field because the lease agreement is usually conforming to geology, and hopefully you're drilling conforming to geology, although that's not always the case. So geology is, cause that the lease and the field should be similar, although leases can end in time, even if it's the same geological play. And then you might have the case where you've got two-dimensional polygons on top of each other, but it's actually different fields because you're targeting different depths, different sands. Anyways, there are limitations to using the leases polygon to map oil fields. So started looking at methods within the 8866 layer itself. And that is using a processing function, which is called minimal boundary. And there's different ways, it's this, you start out with the well data sets, right? And here I've limited it to Barataria, Terrebonne, Nashville Estuary. You can see how there is a lot of coherence in using the field name attribute of a single well to give it a color. And so all of the wells in that field share the color. There's going to be typos, but this is relatively coherent, it seems. Then you run the function minimum bounding geometry, I think it's called, and you learn that maybe not. what's interesting is that a wildcat Lafayette district is going to be the entire triangle. So we see some polygons that are just the entire triangle. And I remember those are wildcats because I've reduced their opacity here. So yeah, how is it? Sometimes you've got this coherence, geographical coherence, and sometimes you've got complete incoherence. Well, those are the wildcat fields, right? Wildcat, South Louisiana, Lafayette District. Wildcat, South Louisiana, New Orleans District. New Orleans District no longer exists. South Wildcat, Southern Louisiana, Homa District. So it's not too much just to make some code just to remove these because these are incoherent, right? These are not relevant geographical information. We're trying to, let's say we're just trying to find the locations of the platforms. You know, we know we've got a list of structures or platforms. It's actually a list of structures that LDC has for Queen Bess Island, right? We just have a list. We don't know where they are. Where could they be? Well, that minimum geography given by the oil wells on the Queen Bess Island field really helps us a lot. And then we can cross-reference this with the SkyTruth data on sun glints, because that data has sun glints that are not, reflective surfaces that are not oil wells, given that their particular tolerances. And then you might, if you selected SkyTruth data within this Queen Bess Island polygon, and you've got 4 points from SkyTruth and 4 platforms in LDCE, you found where they are. Now, which one is which? Good luck. That's more digging. But at least then we know, at least we can start to focus our field work, focus our correlations between different other data sets once we get these field bounding polygons. And then again, note something, it's much smaller than the parish. A lot of good work is going into parish level data, and that's great. That's an important political subdivision. But also we want to talk about environmental justice and sociology, so we need to look at council districts or block groups. Probably block groups is the emerging standard. This is a polygon method that can allow us to relate these oil wells to block group and census tract data. So that's why moving forward with it, even though you can see the data set is not the best maintained, but there doesn't seem to be any alternative. This is the best data set that exists. So it's just a matter of, should LDNR have been taking better care of their data? Sure. But that is not where we find ourselves in 2026. So for something like, I've edited a bunch of these already. Something like this Crown Point oil field, we have a bunch of wells. It's not so coherent, but it's coherent enough. Barataria and Barataria South, I might actually wonder whether Barataria could be more limited than it is at present. I think I've already edited this one. I've already edited Barataria. to eliminate a southern point, but it could likely be eliminated further. Yeah. And I'm trying to come up with the description of the method, whereby I'm doing this. But you see how there's certain oil wells with Barataria South. There's certain with Barataria West. I think I've deselected all the wildcats. So there's no wildcats visible as points in the well layer in this visual. The thing to do, you might want to check that this is the correct oil field first, right? So we'll select one of these wells. We'll confirm that that's Barataria, and confirm that this field name is Barataria, operated by the California company. So that's our light green color on the wells in this instance. And that distinguishes it from Barataria West and Barataria South, although there are boundary issues. You know what? We're going to live with it. There are also boundary issues with Bayou de Fleur. And I guess what I need is maybe someone with oil field experience to tell me, what's best practices? How did this happen where you have these boundary issues? But with 100 years of drilling on the Louisiana coast, I can imagine 7 different ways, just do different drilling campaigns. Is probably the simplest thing that comes to mind. So with this, we go to the vertex editor, right click to highlight the vertices, single click on a vertex, and try to bring this up more in line to where those light green dots actually are limited. And there, now I've got a polygon. Yeah, we've got this outlier over here, but we'll live with that. But I've got a polygon that is a minimum boundary polygon for the wells labeled with the field name Barataria. That doesn't include one. There was one well that was really far south that had completely altered the nature of this polygon and kind of was completely sabotaging the information value of this analysis. But I feel like if we work on these outliers a little bit, it's going to be able to provide us a lot of information. The biggest, look how beautiful that Bayou Penchant oil field is. What good data. That looks like a salt dome. But most of them are not going to be, well, I don't know. A surprising amount of them are likely geologically coherent geographic information. It's just that you're going to have overlapping oil fields. That is geological. What's interesting is how often let's look at this difference between South Kramer oil fields and Melodia. Why is there? It's amazing to me how often there are single wells far away from the rest of the cluster labeled with the field name, to where that does not make logistical sense to me. Now, this one's not so bad because it just creates this spike. If I was really digging into Kramer, which we might, it's an important oil field for backfilling. Do we really want to consider this oil well part of the South Kramer oil field? Um, we might consider making this a smaller polygon in order to target our field work. And then we're going to need to go back and then do a selection using these polygons and finding those wells that are labeled with the field name but are now outside of the field name polygon. And I need a good name for these. the errants, the wells errant. Because if I alter this polygon, and I think I'm going to take a philosophy of minimal alteration from the existing data set. But some of them I'm definitely going to work on, like Lake Hatch. Lake Hatch is nowhere near Lake Hatch. It's very confusing. Caillou Island, which is a very important oil field, is this huge green blob covering a sixth of Terrebonne Parish. I'm going to alter them. But maybe a philosophy of minimal alterations to create a minimal number of oil wells errant that will now be outside of their polygons. And then maybe, was that a historic truth or was it a clerical error? And I'm going to take the gamble that the array of structures that LDCE lists are going to be in the middle of the polygon, the kind of the middle density of the polygon. We may go back and refine these polygons with some density measures. Because originally I thought about K clustering for some of this stuff, but now that I see that these data sets have wells errant, I think I'm going to do some informal further minimization or it's like cutting off the outliers in a statistical analysis, right? There's obviously some geographic nonsense, whether that was, something that someone meant to do or something that happened by accident. I think it's worth rectifying some of this geographic nonsense, keeping track of which wells have the bad information so we can make sure to check up on those. Hopefully it's not going to be more than 350, and hopefully it's not more than 50 wells errant. Wells that are geographically more unique than they're most of the wells in the oil field. So this is just a video trying to document this process and right. And I think you could see the challenges we have and the fruitfulness that this might be able to provide. Peace.